fishing industry for a number of years. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call Reno Chirakatne.
Kia ora, Mr Speaker. It's my pleasure to make a contribution at this first reading of the Fisheries, Foreign Charter Vessels and Other Matters Amendment Bill. As my colleagues have expressed in their contributions, we support this bill, sir. We do welcome it. It's a long time coming, and we know that it has been brought about through some unfortunate circumstances, in particular the terrible tales of exploitation, of exploitative employment practices and tragedies that occurred on the high seas with the foreign charter vessels such as the Oyang 70 around about 2 years ago. And there was the ministerial inquiry which followed up from that tragedy, and it's very good to see that of all the recommendations expressed in this bill, that the government has actually gone further than what the ministerial inquiry recommended. There was a bit of toss-up between whether they would continue with bareboat charters or go to complete reflagging of vessels, and following consideration by the ministry and their recommendations, they've decided, the ministry advised and the minister has taken on board that all foreign charter vessels are to be reflagged, operating within New Zealand waters, will be reflagged come 2016. And that's an issue which I'd like to take up, sir, because when the ministerial inquiry was conducting their work, and they heard submissions up and down the country and heard many submissions right across the industry, the panel said in its conclusion, "We've concluded that urgent corrective action is required in the way New Zealand regulates its activities of foreign chartered vessels in its exclusive economic zone." Well, urgent corrective action, waiting for another 3 to 4 years for this reflagging to be actually implemented is not that urgent. And we know that some leading figures in the fishing industry have made calls for bringing that requirement forward, making to say 2 years, a 2-year time frame. But alas, the government has decided that they want a 4-year lead-in so that companies can prepare and can alter their commercial or contractual charter arrangements, or indeed find new catching capacity so they can bring in new foreign chartered vessels under the new regime. So it will take a while before the full force of this legislation is actually going to be felt, but at least it's a good step forward that these measures are being put in place. And I guess, we've heard, looking at the submissions, that, everyone in the fishing industry, they love to fish, obviously. Fishermen love to fish, they love to catch lots of fish, and obviously they want to catch it profitably and make a good return on their invested capital, whether it's in their vessels or on their property rights with their quota and annual catch entitlements. And I know that there were calls from the Māori investment in fisheries, and obviously Māori are significant stakeholders in the fishing industry through the Te Ahu Kai Moana and Aotearoa Fisheries and all of the assets that are owned within those companies, like Sealord, 50% shareholding, and also directly the property rights that are held by iwi directly through their allocated shares to the Māori fishery settlement. And I know that there has been concern expressed from those elements of the Māori fishing sector that, they didn't want to see the introduction of too much of a compliance regime for foreign chartered vessels because of the potential increased costs that it will impose on the industry and resulting loss in value of their property rights. And the iwi groups around the country, many of them have actually had quite good business relationships with foreign chartered vessel companies by virtue of the fact that they could run at a lower cost than other industry players, other domestic industry players that is, because they were exploiting their labour, and they could run, it was operating in a false economy. But on the flip side of that, the resource rentals or the returns that could be paid to the iwi quota owners were a lot higher than what, say, the prevailing market will be, we shall see, with a more consistent regime which will apply through this piece of legislation. So not everyone will be happy, but there is a 4-year lead-in time. So no fishing boat owner will want to have their boat tied up. Wherever they are around the world, there is a lot of excess fishing capacity around the world, and there won't be, I don't suspect it will be too hard for existing companies or charter operators to find new commercial arrangements, or indeed just to tweak their current commercial arrangements with their foreign boat owners to ensure that they meet the grade and can operate to consistent levels right across the board, because we don't want to see the horrific stories about abuse and exploitation that has occurred. I've been on one of those charter vessels, sir. This one in particular, they're usually very, very big, very old, over 50 years old at least. They've been through multiple owners, and they're what we call old dungers in the industry. Very sturdy, but very unsafe, and it's not cut out for big guys like me, 6'4". You have to sort of duck to get around, and like any rabbit warren in these big old vessels. That's why they're crewed by largely some small crew, many of them sourced from Indonesia, good friends of our mate Mr. Prosser over there, we hope. But they are good, hard-working crew, and it's great to see that we can raise their standard so at least they can be on a consistent level with all New Zealand fishers. Just continuing on, Mr. Speaker. So there's also, but they draw crew from all around the world. But what would be good to see, Mr. Speaker, and I'd just like to refer to the objectives, the government's objectives in relation to foreign-owned flag vessels, which the Minister mentioned in his speech. And one of those objectives is to ensure acceptable and equitable New Zealand labour standards are applied on all fishing vessels operating in New Zealand fisheries waters. And this legislation does achieve that, albeit it won't kick in until another 3 years' time. But what that objective doesn't, alas, include is securing opportunities for Kiwi workers. So it's great that there will be fair and acceptable, equitable labour standards. It would have been great if the government went a step further and said, and also making sure that that the labour on those vessels, the opportunities are there for Kiwi workers. Labour's policy is to have progressively built in a 50% requirement that all the crew, if they're all on a consistent level under New Zealand law, that we get a larger proportion of those workers, up to 50%, being crewed by Kiwis. And that's what we want to see, and I'm sure that's what Māori want to see. Those treaty rights which were recognised through for the fisheries settlement, for Māori to get into the business and activity of fishing. And so it would be great to see more Māori crew on those boats, getting fairly rewarded for a hard day's work. And I'd also like to say that fishing is more than just food, because now we are seeing our major companies diversifying into nutraceuticals, into fish oils, and in fact there's a lot of extra value. A low value fish can be turned into a high value fish We just need the R&D investment to go into those companies, and hopefully New Zealand Labour will give those incentives so we can turn that $1.5 billion industry much higher. Kia ora tātou.
Simon O'Connor.
Mr.